all of you have been invited at the instance of PUCL Maharashtra, which is hosting this meeting.
Through the stories that I narrate in this book, because let me clarify at the outset that unlike my co-panelists, I have no airs of being an expert on the subject. I am not an academic. I am merely a journalist, and I come from this tradition of facts being sacred and opinion being free, and we are essentially trained as storytellers. We believe that storytelling can be very effective in conveying our point. We don't necessarily theorize. We don't, give you solutions, but it's for you to infer whatever you can from those stories.
I'm Sunil Yadav, manual scavenger in Mumbai Corporation. Sir, 24 August 2023 came one GR from Social Justice Minister Department. They mention is that in view of the above and consider the law laid down by the Honorable Supreme Court in Ahmednagar, Mahanagarpalika was Ambedkar Palika Kamgar Union 2020 SSCs, we direct that the state government would refrain from extending to benefit of the government resolution date 24 February 2023 until further order save and expected to the legal heir of those employment who belong to Valmiki, Mitta and Bhangi communities. Sir, manual scavenger are touchable among touchable, untouchable among untouchable now time. So, sir, is Bhangi community, Bhangi word is banned from law, but here openly after that 2040s era is Hindu era is openly discriminate and one second. Sir, here Prevention of Atrocity Act 1989, there section 31X clearly mention intentionally use derogatory remark with intent to humiliate a member of SC and ST's community. That will amount of offense and he shall be liable of prosecute. Sir, after post independence, every government violent and exploited our manual scavenger rights, but continue after that also that stage. So it is my question, sir. Bhangi derogatory word remark in the GR. So who is speaking about that? So Aurangabad High Court and Social Justice Department. So it is not good. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
As a journalist, I'm asking Manoj Mitta, who's been a colleague for very long, what made you want to write this book? Did you come across some story which inspired you to go deeper into this? And the second thing is that what was the most painful realization you got from this after doing this book? I mean, I got some real painful realizations listening to you. So when you were finally finished with it, what were you most disillusioned about?
What prompted my book? I do explain in the preface that, I did 2 books prior to this, both dealing with mass violence, and I really meant to complete a trilogy on mass violence, this time focusing on violence targeting Dalits. And there is an additional angle to it that unlike in the case of communal violence where there is no special law, in the case of caste violence there is supposed to be a law that is allegedly draconian. So why is it that despite an allegedly draconian law, there is so much impunity for it? I try to understand that, explore that through various cases, and again I come to this pattern of some arm or the other of the Indian state, be it the police, prosecuting agency, the trial court or the appellate courts, would betray this deeply ingrained prejudice, as evident from the very flimsy grounds on which they would let off the killers in those cases. So I wanted to understand where this, prejudice, this structural bias was coming from. And for that, I looked into debates in the Constituent Assembly about abolition of untouchability. Then I felt the need to go further back. I looked at the various debates. They came as a bit of an eye-opener because none of the existing books really deal with these aspects. So I I found myself going all the way back 2 centuries of various legislative and judicial debates dealing with different aspects of caste reform, and that's why this widened ambit, what was originally meant to be only focused on caste violence, that became the last 2 chapters of this book. And the 16 chapters that precede it is to give you a sense of where that impunity was really coming from, right? And the last question was, what was the most painful realization for me? The most painful realization was that, if these debates that I was talking about, these battles for equality, important as they are, these are not just a matter of history. They relate to today's fault lines too. It helps us understand what is happening in today's India, and yet we know little or nothing about it. For instance, even in today's India, intercaste marriage can lead to honor killings. It has happened over and over again in a progressive state like Tamil Nadu. Where is this coming from? How will you address this issue if you do not even know that in the year 1918, a man like Vittalbhai Patel piloted this legislation, and he faced such pushback that it led to a 30-year battle. He long passed away. And finally, in the year 1949, Thakurdas Bhargava, I'm happy to say he was a Brahmin. Why am I happy to say? Because these battles were not necessarily between Brahmins and non-Brahmins. It was really between progressive Hindus or liberal Hindus on the one side and Orthodox Hindus. So there were Brahmins on both sides, right? So there was this progressive Hindu called Thakurdas Bhargava, and when he introduced this bill in 1949, suddenly in that very body, that parliament of the time, there was zero resistance. In the year 1918, it was unthinkable for that legislation to be passed because there was such overwhelming opposition to it on the grounds of religious feelings. But in 1949, that same religion is there. The members of the Hindu community were the predominant part of the legislative body. But those allegations of that being against their religion, their fears of their religion being in danger, had suddenly evaporated. Why? What happened? And this is where, academics can come in. I can only speculate. It's possible that, this is all in the immediate aftermath of independence. So it was this argument, this excuse was not available to our legislators anymore, that look, we will do this all in good time, a kind of excuse that, say, Tilak first started in the context of age of consent bill in 1891, that, we don't want you to deal with any social reform issues, we will deal with them in a good time when we come to power. Now they did come to power post 47, so they had to deal with it. It was not available to them anymore, that excuse that, British are in some way responsible for the perpetuation of these retrograde customs. They were now in power, and legislation to legalize intercaste marriage was on the table. So they could not, they did not have the face to oppose it anymore. So that is probably the reason. And maybe it was just that sense of idealism that, gripped the nation post-independence. So that was the context in which suddenly that opposition evaporated. So I realized that there was this 30-year battle that took place in the context of intercaste marriage, and it says something about our society. It says something about what our leaders thought at the time, and it says something about how those thoughts are still prevalent, which is the reason why more than a century after Patel initiated this reform. He initiated it in 1918 and we are talking in 2023. That's more than a century later. And even now, intercaste marriage hasn't become the norm yet. There is a survey not too long ago which said that it's no more than 5%. And if you think that's a gross underestimate, maybe it's about 10%. That's not the norm still, right? And there are still instances of intercaste marriage leading to violence, honor killings, where parents kill their own children. Where is this coming from? So I realized that, in this whole obsession with the narrative that was set by, we are all very conscious of post 2014, how there's a certain narrative that's being built. Everything that is worth happening, worth being proud of, began to happen only in 2014, right? Something similar seemed to have happened before that. Whatever Gandhi dealt with, or whatever his party was doing, the mainstream, whatever they were dealing with, were all what got due attention in our history, were all what were valorized in our history, what people who are dealing with social reform battles. There were two parallel struggles, political struggle and social reform struggle. And the social reform struggle, which had a lot to do with caste, predated colonial rule. It goes all the way back to Buddha, Kabir, Nanak, and so on, right? So this social reform battle never got its due was a painful realization that dawned on me, and that is why I felt that we need to go into that, because those battles, those unfinished battles, are in some senses, responsible for today's, problems, today's fault lines is the painful realization I got.
As it was mentioned earlier also, that while our constitution has Article 17 which talks about abolition of untouchability, there is not even a directive principle which talks about abolition of caste. Okay, so if one is, one has to look at the constitution in that context also. It doesn't talk about abolition of caste even as an aspiration. Forget as a present fundamental right reality. Now, that's one aspect one has to bear in mind. The book is very rich, and we could obviously, in the limited time, we could not discuss a lot of issues which are thrown up in the book, including a lot of the 19th century struggles with law, with judgments, with court battles, which he discusses, Manoj discusses in the book. A lot of it we could not, we were mainly focusing today on 20th century and maybe post 20th century a little bit about the violence, etc., etc. So a lot of that is also, a lot of that material is in the book which discusses about the 19th century. So this is the time the British came, actually the East India Company came, and then how things changed within East India Company's control with Lord Dalhousie, and which we discuss in quite a lot of detail. And then of course British Crown takes over from East India Company, and then how their approach is slightly different from the approach of the East India Company, etc. A lot of it we couldn't get in, discuss in the limited time we had, but thank you all for coming. Thanks all three of you for being here and making it a very, very lively discussion. Thanks a lot. That's it. That's the end of the meeting.